Hi, it's been a while since I've spoken to you guys through from YouTube, and a lot of has changed since I made my last video discussing my thoughts on the coronavirus. And I'm sure many of you have been researching huge amounts, looking into it all. So just to mention, like my own personal state has changed a lot. Like my state of mind and my life is still going really well, but my state of mind has definitely improved since the last video. I have to admit, I was definitely caught up in the narrative quite a bit and was a little bit scared. Although I was definitely trying to help people with my message to try and get them prepared a little bit physically for the huge amount of panic buying that went on. But now it seemed to have calmed down quite a lot. But then, of course, the looming economic problems that we may well be facing in the future could then again maybe spark something similar. But who knows? There's a lot of factors to take into account for what's going on in the world right now. For sure, though, there is a huge amount of positive stuff happening, although it's been very hard for a lot of people. And for sure, it's going to get a lot harder and things may get a little bit worse. But then, amongst all of this, even with the economic pressures and the shutting down of businesses and people losing their jobs, which is all pretty heavy stuff considering, how we need money to survive. But through it all, I'm very optimistic as this is almost an opportunity for a partial reset of much of the system, and much of people's perspectives. And of course, even if we do still keep this current way of life, it's still tied to the debt system, it's still got the same monetary system. So ultimately, the very core of this system is still corrupt and rotten and would be better to be dealt away with. But I imagine that takes time and isn't something that could just happen at a flick of a switch. But yeah, so for a while, a lot of people had to stop what they were doing for a while, and although it may have been quite stressful, I think for some people it was actually a well-needed break, even if they didn't know they needed it, just so they can maybe now reassess what they're doing with their life, especially if they were doing something that they really didn't enjoy just to survive, and then they had to stop that for a little while. Maybe they're going to take a step back and think, oh, well, how do I want to spend the rest of my life? Do I want to go back to that job, or do I want to do something else? And of course, with every crisis that strikes us, there's always an opportunity to make the most of it. To be opportunistic, because the evil forces that are on this planet, they for sure are very opportunistic. So there's good reason for that. That want to ride the wave of opportunity when it comes. So there's going to be, there's a lot of differences we will notice going forward, and I don't think we'll ever go back to the world we had 6 months ago. But maybe that's a good thing because human society couldn't carry on the way it was going anyway. Something had to crack, and this is just like one of the cracks on the sinking ship almost. So hopefully we take it in our stride and we come together as a race and we really go forward in a positive way. Of course, the people operating the governments, the globalist system, are going to try and do everything they can to stop that. But what's interesting is I think that they're starting to lose power. I actually think the positive forces are actually starting to win this fight, this battle, this evolution. And it's just from my own, from looking at people, looking at people's comments on online articles, talking to people, speaking to people on forums, and merging it all together and just getting my guesstimate of what I feel like the human consciousness is at the moment. And of course, it varies so much from person to person, but in general, I believe we are seeing a huge increase in the consciousness level of humanity, and this manifests as questioning the status quo, and then maybe doing something different with your life than what you've been doing before, where you was just believing the matrix sort of set up and doing what everyone else is doing just to make ends meet, and just because that's the program. Well, now maybe people will stop doing that for a bit, and maybe things will actually start to improve. And now, I've always been an optimist, but recently a very well respected friend of mine has started speaking about the Q phenomenon. And at first, when I heard about this like a year or so ago, I just sort of brushed it aside, like, yeah, whatever, as if there are actually good people in the higher ranks of government and military, especially even in the United States. And yeah, I sort of brushed it away, but now I'm starting to think about it, and I'm starting to think like it's often said about how the politicians that are in power represent the collective of the country, maybe to varying degrees, and usually the dark side of humanity. But if humans are actually evolving and maturing and rising as a race, then does that mean that some of the symptoms of this collective unconscious is actually going in a positive way, it's getting some positive vibes, symptoms of that may well manifest as collective events unfolding in a positive manner. Stuff like Q could actually be a symptom of humanity awakening. And it could be that this is how it happens. You get the consciousness of each individual starts to rise, and then it gets so powerful that it just has to start to force reality to change. And maybe, just maybe, that is Q. Or if Q doesn't exist, I'm totally up for the idea, and I totally resonate with the idea that there are very clever, wise, connected, powerful people who are on the side of the good guys. And the Q sort of claimed the Q guys claimed to come back from all the way from JFK, and for sure he was definitely he was a good guy trying to do some good things. So if there was enough of a positive force to get him into power back then, maybe that power still exists, or maybe it had to go into hiding for a bit because it sort of lost that chess game when JFK got killed and had to recalibrate itself. And this also ties very nicely into my own personal theory about positive secret societies. And again, it's not like I've gone to a building and sort of seen one and been initiated into this positive secret society, but I just have this feeling, this like nudge, this like hunch that there are very powerful, connected, wise individuals operating behind the scenes in ways that maybe we can't even see most of the time if we're going to start talking about the occult and the hyperdimensional, the energetic layer of reality. But even still, maybe you're here on the ground in 3D, this could manifest in, certain books that are released anonymously. Throughout the history, there's some interesting books that have been released anonymously, or films like The Matrix. For me, it just sort of cries out that there were some very wise and intelligent people behind that, beyond what you would imagine for your standard movie director. Now, of course, maybe they just were onto something, although I have been told the Wachowskis didn't actually write the script for The Matrix. I haven't looked into that. I was only told about that. So it's things like that, things like the Matrix films and stuff like that. And now maybe this whole political movement of the Q phenomenon. And I haven't been following Donald Trump's policies much really over these past years he's been in office, but recently I've been following a little bit, obviously with the corona, just to see what's going on over there. And I have to admit, I was very impressed and very supportive of the move of the United States government to stop funding the World Health Organization, because most of us know now, anyone who's waking up, and does a little bit of research, understands that the World Health Organization is totally corrupt, and it's Bill Gates, I believe, it will be the biggest funder once the United States pulls out of that. So it's basically Bill Gates' sort of pet plaything that he's trying to impose his agenda of vaccines to the entire world through the World Health Organization, which he funds through his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is like a charity that's actually acting like a corporation, which is just there to further Bill Gates' agenda. But everyone's like, hey, look at this great guy, he's donating all this money to charity, but in fact the charities actually serve nothing more than to further roll out and perpetuate Bill Gates' agenda. And of course, ultimately, it isn't really Bill Gates' agenda, because he is just a mere puppet in the forces that are operating behind the scenes, and you follow that up to the hyperdimensional realms, and things get pretty dark and pretty deep. From my own experience of looking into this and researching, I came to these conclusions as well, that there is a very dark force operating behind the scenes of humanity, and it's been called Wetiko or Jinn throughout many old cultures around the world. But yeah, I still believe they're here. But then if they are here, then that means that there's an equal and opposing force of the divine that's also here, that's so powerful. And I do believe the divine doesn't get enough credit sometimes for just how powerful it is. And I believe, part of the darkness's game, if you will, is to give the impression that they have a lot more power than they do, so people give it to them. Just like in the film The Wizard of Oz, where at the very end, you got this big scary guy, face, figure, whatever, and then we realise that it's just a man behind a curtain, and the entire thing is fake. There is no real big scary person, it's just an illusion. Now that is totally how the Matrix operates. And you could say, some say even that the Wizard of Oz was influenced via these higher positive connections, whatever you want to call them, but it's another subject. So yeah, I feel very optimistic going forward, and I know it might be tough for a lot of you right now, but for sure, just stay strong in your heart because we are going through an awakening right now. People are waking up to themselves, and it manifests in so many different ways, and it's different for everybody. Some people will, they'll suddenly realize that the government is corrupt, or they'll suddenly realize they actually have to take care of their body and start exercising and eating right and doing body mind practices and stop consuming negative material that doesn't serve you, which is the news most of the time. Actually start consuming some positive, empowering information, not to completely not look at the dark at all, but don't let it consume your life like some people do, tuned into the news every day, especially with this corona stuff that's going on. I can't imagine how much time people are investing just glued to the screen in fear because of what the media is telling them. But thankfully, I believe that portion of humanity is getting smaller. The powerful, empowering side of humanity is getting stronger, and this gives me a lot of hope. I see so much potential for humanity right now, and there's a lot of talk now in the conscious community about the timeline splits. Where things are gonna just, it's gonna be two Earths, and the bad guys are gonna go to one, the good guys are gonna go to the other. And it sounds great, and I actually kind of, I toy with the idea, and I do believe it's possible, although my understanding of quantum mechanics, physics doesn't even begin to grasp how that would actually happen. But I do think it's possible. But I also think it's possible that this timeline could just become really fucking awesome. We could just have such a strong force with the positive force in our hearts and come together as a collective to then influence the minds of all the people who might just be, who are like leaves in the wind, who haven't quite realized their power, and then they give their power away to other people. But unfortunately, the people that they usually give their power to are fucking evil and corrupt and take advantage of them and rob them in very subtle ways through debt, blah blah blah, tax and all that. But if people are not yet ready to claim a higher part of themselves and are still in this sort of, like a leaf in the wind being blown wherever the strongest wind blows them, what if the strongest wind just happens to be a huge wave of divine power that just sweeps across the world and encompasses all of those people who are just not quite sure right now and blasts them with some powerful healing energy to then they are lifted. They are lifted, and it totally counteracts exactly what the opposite has, the negative forces have been doing, which is pumping out so much negativity and fear and division and scarcity and all of these horrible, evil things, which of course are there to serve to wake us up. But ultimately, the part of the journey of learning how to deal and overcome the darkness is to get the fuck rid of it to whatever degree you can, in my opinion. And you're never going to eradicate evil completely, as far as I understand this reality. But hey, maybe we could just get it in check. So instead of it being, I don't know, 80% negative, 20% positive, why don't we just flip that the fuck around and make it 20% negative, 80% positive? Let's roll into a golden age. Let's make it happen. And yeah, let's create some positive fucking ripples, because I'm feeling really inspired. Like me right now, my journey is getting even better. I'm taking even better care of myself. I'm starting to combine serious workout routine with Qigong, and it's really starting to show benefits, as well as improving my diet even more than I knew I could, cutting out a huge amount of carbs, and now rice is like my main carbohydrate now. I don't even deal with gluten, and I've been eating less but eating better quality, and it feels so good. And I'm just going to keep resonating my vibe, keep putting out my music. My album is coming along really well. For those of you who've been following my YouTube or whatever for quite a while, you might know I'm working on my new album. It's coming, and it's going to be powerful, and it just ties into everything that I'm doing. I also have a few other projects. It's one that I'm going to be able to announce this year, I imagine. And so it's all happening for me, and I want to see it happen for you. I want people to evolve, and I want to make it happen, and I want to be there, because we got front row tickets to watch the evolution of humanity, and it's fucking amazing. So yeah, stay strong out there, guys. It's happening.